Hello and welcome to this session of Groundbreakers Live. I'm your host Javed Mohammed, and I'm very honored to have with us Kevin Wittek, who's our Oracle Groundbreaker Ambassador. Kevin, welcome.
Hi, nice to be virtually with you.
Yes, absolutely. Um, so Kevin, you're presenting at JavaLand 2021. So you have a session there called Blockchain 101 for developers. So I guess its name sounds pretty straightforward that you're going to cover some of the basics. So give us some of your thoughts of, I don't know, blockchain has been around for a short while, and depending on it's all relative. Where are we at in terms of the hype about it, and give us a sense of what your take on it is.
Yeah, it's a little bit funny. So we had a similar conversation a couple of months ago when I was
Uh-huh.
with the Oracle Virtual Tour, and back then the public landscape was a bit different still of blockchain in general. And in the last months we got quite a hype for certain public blockchain phenomena.
Hmm.
It's mainly NFT, non-fungible tokens. And I don't know if other people even notice this, but in the blockchain space and in the crypto artist space, this has been a super big thing. Actually, it's that big that it even goes into normal public media and people talk about NFTs,
Hmm.
which are not a new thing. So NFTs are around for many years in the blockchain space, but suddenly there has been some acceptance by users to invest real world cash into buying those virtual digital assets
Hmm.
that are just stored in the blockchain, those non-fungible tokens. So very often they represent digital art, for example.
Hmm.
And this thing suddenly brought out a new blockchain hype, which is not something I'm entirely happy about, because it became a little bit more calm about blockchain in the public media, which
Hmm.
is good, because if the hype goes away, you can start being more productive, actually, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And now the hype is coming up. And again, you have now a situation where people throw all those things, all those different concepts together. So it's a mixture of blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, NFT, proof of work, high energy usage, and people don't distinguish between those different things. And if they are not immersed in the concepts, they mix them all together and get them wrong mostly.
Hmm.
And it's something I have to argue against then. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to, so there's this hype out there. Help us understand. Let's get back down to basics. So again, perhaps just for the benefit of everyone out there, what are the key concepts that people need to understand about blockchain?
So there are mostly two different classes of blockchain. One are those public blockchain networks, and then more recently, or actually over the last years, we also saw a rise of enterprise blockchains or intranet blockchains, or however you would call them. Many
Okay.
people would say uh, only the public blockchains are real blockchains. So public blockchains are, for example, something like Ethereum or Bitcoin. It is a public network operated by many different entities, many different users, many different systems, and they don't really trust each other necessarily, but they cooperate with each other by means of the protocols, how the protocols work. It's a very big distributed system, and it syncs up their state based on the protocol. And then one of those consensus protocols, that also is one of the reasons why blockchain has a bad reputation, is proof of work, which uses a lot of energy.
Hmm.
But so this is a way like how the network works. But at its core, what blockchain can do, it's just a distributed append-only data storage that can record transactions, and
Hmm.
that is immutable. So it's append only, and you can't change previous state, and it can be used for different use cases. Of course, Bitcoin is famous for representing a digital cash, like
Hmm.
financial transactions, but you can do everything. So it's just a data store, an append only data store, and you can save what you want. Of course, certain data makes more sense than others, but it is um, basically how you say, so it doesn't care which data you put in theory.
Hmm. Okay. And what about, so that was the public part of blockchain. What about on the enterprise side?
Yeah, so the enterprise side is many people argue if you need a blockchain in an enterprise context. So one of the core things that makes blockchains useful and powerful is the fact that parties that don't necessarily trust each other operate a system together.
Mhm.
So if you have a single company, then chances are the different parts of your company should normally trust each other
Mhm.
to operate correctly with each other. So then the question, do you really need a blockchain for this? Or you if you implement or use a certain system, is it correct to still call it blockchain because it just has some of the properties of the public blockchain and not
Mhm.
all? So I personally I say, okay, if you have this distributed append only database that synchronizes itself, let's call it blockchain. Let's also call it blockchain in enterprise context, okay? And for
Mhm.
some use cases, it might be also fine to use it in an enterprise context. And there are many different softwares you can use them. It's different software sometimes than compared to the public ones. And one interesting thing is that you then don't have to use this expensive proof of work. So since you have a different trust level between the parties operating the software, you can use mechanisms such as proof of authority, where you don't have to invest this computational work. You just show you have a valid certificate, and thereby you are allowed to participate in the network. So, and then you have a system that is as performant or not than any other distributed system, I would say.
Mhm.
And it's fine for different use cases. And then there is this middle ground between completely private blockchains and public blockchains. And I personally find this middle ground quite interesting. And we call this consortium run blockchains, for example. You have a set of different entities of different companies that work together to operate this network together for the greater good of all involved parties. For example, you might find this in supply chain services,
Mhm.
for example, where the different vendors or the different manufacturers might operate an infrastructure together. And it works well on a technical level. Then you can also normally use proof of authority. And yeah, you still have not the single point of control. So assuming you do supply chain tracking and some of the entities involved wants to fake the data it put into because it was I don't know, I don't have a good example. It was some medicine and there was illegal
But
stuff
something is
inside.
not maybe like something is maybe not authentic, right? So
Yeah,
you talked about supply chain. So maybe people are using counterfeit parts for car
yeah,
manufacturing. I don't know.
for yes, for example, something like this. And
Uh-huh.
now in theory, like this maybe comes out, maybe it doesn't come out, but now in theory, the one, if you would have a classical database, the entity controlling this classical database might be able to override just parts of the history, might be able to fake the data in a way that this doesn't come up. Yeah.
Mhm.
While with this, if you have this consortium or consortium run blockchain, you would need to have the majority of the network cooperate with each other to fake the history,
Mhm.
which might be quite hard to achieve. So you get a higher degree of integrity of the data, knowing that the data hasn't been changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I get the general premise behind this one. So kind of taking what we have and kind of projecting forward in an ideal world, whether it be in the public domain and or in the enterprise and supply chain, if if blockchain becomes kind of prevalent in what kind of world will we be living in?
Yeah. So there is this saying is what is it, Amara's law, and he said we tend to overestimate what technology can do in the short run and underestimate what it can do in the long run.
Okay, I love
So
that answer.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
so probably we will have something like this in the blockchain.
Okay.
But in general, what it is, it can be a very useful kind of a integration messaging protocol, because in the end, what is it? It's an event store. You have events that can happen there, and then you have a very nice distributed event store that is immutable.
Mhm.
So it is mainly it might be a messaging protocol for further automation that might be very useful.
Mhm,
And with regards, this is a special thing I didn't mention before, there is a different concept with regards to blockchain, some blockchain system. It's called smart contracts.
mhm,
And smart contracts are basically applications for which the code is deployed into the blockchain network. And then it is very similar to object-oriented programming, by the way. So you instantiate a smart contract, then you have like an object. This
mhm,
object lives in the network. It encapsulates all its data, and it is a rich state because it has the history of its state. But
mhm,
it can have core business logic, and it can react to other events happening on this blockchain or coming from outside, basically.
mhm,
And by this way, you can think about a lot of ways of automation of certain, not necessarily contracts like the real world contracts, but still some kind of business logic, business contracts
mhm,
that you can automate via this mean in a distributed fashion with no one actually controlling the system. And if we think some of the public blockchains, Bitcoin, Ethereum, like they are running, and no one can stop them right now. It's
mhm,
kind of fascinating. Yeah, it's maybe also a little bit scary,
uh-huh,
but there is no way for governments to say, okay, revert these transactions. It's
mhm,
nearly impossible, statistically impossible, nearly. And many interesting things can come out of this. Also dangerous things.
mhm.
We are human after all, but let's see.
Yes. All right. Well, Kevin, it's a fascinating space, a fascinating talk, and we encourage all the viewers out there to check it out at JavaLand 2021. So, Kevin, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thanks as well, Javed.